Hey everybody, welcome to our channel. Hey guys, we're your hosts, M and J, and today we're talking about the finale of Season 2 of Netflix's She-Ra, and honestly, watching this made us regret calling the last season finale underwhelming, because at least there was build up to it and something actually happened, because calling this episode underwhelming would be an understatement. Season 3 is going to premiere in August, but it's pretty obvious that this season was just split in two so they could spread it out over the course of a few more months. So narrative-wise, this really wasn't a finale, but this season would have been more interesting if they had replaced the finale with the Light Spinner episode, since that was the most interesting thing we got this season, and just moved the ending of this episode to that episode, because this just didn't work as a finale. This episode begins with Bo studying the message on his tracker pad. He's trying to figure out what the word Serenia means, but he's not able to come up with anything. He's interrupted by an alarm that apparently reminds him he had plans for that day, so he runs off in a hurry. Not long after, Glimmer wakes up Adora in a panic. She says that Bo is in trouble. We also find out that Adora sleeps with a knife, probably a holdover from the Horde. Glimmer drags Adora out into the Whispering Woods, saying that Bo's arrows and tracker pad are missing, so he must have left after he shot that arrow through her window. Adora points out that the note attached to the arrow says that he's fine and not to come looking for him. Glimmer gets really upset and says that he's not fine, because if he was, he would have told him that he was leaving. And she starts attaching it back to the signal about Mara, although I'm not really sure what that has to do with anything right now. So Adora asks where Bo goes when he's not in Bright Moon, but Glimmer doesn't know despite being childhood friends. She says that he's very private about his past and he never talks about it, which would be fine if Glimmer wasn't the princess of Bright Moon. Isn't it kind of dangerous to not know the background of her friends? What if Bo was secretly a Horde spy? He obviously isn't, but just saying. They should probably know who their princess is hanging out with. But the two follow his trail and they find his discarded bow and arrows. So now Glimmer's convinced he's in trouble, and Adora sees a mysterious building in the middle of the Whispering Woods. It's pretty big, and it's not exactly hidden, but it also looks like no one's been around in a while. The two teleport inside and find that it's a library. Adora asks Glimmer if she knew there was a library in the Whispering Woods, which she didn't, which is a little weird considering the fact that she's the princess of Bright Moon. Who does this library serve exactly? It just seems to be the structure in the middle of the woods for no reason. Bo comes in and they're horrified to see that he's wearing a shirt, and he's equally concerned that they're there, after he specifically told them not to follow him. The door starts to open again, so Bo grabs the weapons from Adora. He stashes a sword of protection in a vase, and slides his bow and arrow underneath a display case. He frantically tells the two of them to play along, and introduces them to his parents, George and Lance. Bo claims that Adora and Glimmer are friends of his from the academy. Apparently he's been telling his parents that he's been off at a boarding school this entire time, and hiding his true intentions from them. So basically, this episode is just him desperately trying to keep his parents from finding out the truth. This show is pretty heavy on tropes and stereotypes, but this episode is right out of a cheesy sitcom. All it's really missing is the laugh track. From Bo's constant lying, to his parents' very over-the-top gay couple stereotypes. This doesn't really feel like a fantasy show, more like a 90s sitcom with some fantasy elements thrown in, and it's honestly kind of awkward. But Lance and George are very happy to meet the two of them, and Bo looks really uncomfortable about the whole thing. It then cuts abruptly to the Fright Zone, and to be honest, I don't really care for cutting back and forth, because it causes these weird tonal shifts. Our heroes are messing around with petty family drama, but then things are actually happening in the Horde. Shadow Weaver escaped in the last episode, so Catra's on edge, demanding that they beef up security, and that her subordinates report anything suspicious directly back to her. So at least that's something. That's way more than we can say for the heroes. She thinks she sees Shadow Weaver's shadow on the wall and jumps back in fright. The thing is, she doesn't want to let the others know exactly why she's so on edge. Lonnie asks if Shadow Weaver's cell being empty counts as strange, and Catra gets defensive, claiming that she threw her in solitary last night. She then demands that they go and follow her orders. Scorpio looks back like she's surprised and concerned by this, but Catra just slams the door in her face. This moment would have been more impactful if I felt like they had a better relationship. but they're not usually on the same page. In fact, they're usually on very different pages. Plus, Catra is her superior, so she really shouldn't be questioning her. Back with the best friend squad, things are really awkward, because of course it is. Lance is pretty energetic and offers snacks to the guests, but he's pretty forgetful and needs to be reminded of what he was doing. Adora keeps speaking with weird inflections. It gets old fast and I'm honestly not sure what she's doing.
We can be scholars. How hard can it be?
How is that not suspicious? This whole thing is so awkward. But it turns out that Bo is the youngest of 13, and when the two of them retire, they plan on giving the library to Bo. I'm not sure why though, they say that the other 12 are also historians, so why does Bo get the inheritance? Also, doesn't the inheritance usually go to the oldest child? They don't explain their motivation for giving Bo the library, which is the central conflict of this episode. But Lance offers them a tour of the library, including historical facts from the first ones, and he's particularly excited about a runestone shard they've managed to collect. But George cuts in, claiming that the only reason the runestone is there is because it has historical value, otherwise he wouldn't allow it in the library. Apparently George fought in the original Princess Alliance, but came home to find his village completely destroyed. So now not only does he hate war, but he also hates the princesses, and doesn't want anything that reminds him of them at all. Glimmer points out that it's the Horde that started the war, but George brushes her off, simply claiming that they're too young to remember the Princess Alliance, so they wouldn't understand, but that he made a vow that his family would never be involved in war or the princesses again, and that's all we get out of him. I can't really defend the princesses based on their actions in this show, but the Horde are aliens who invaded the planet, are trying to conquer it, and have killed people and destroyed multiple settlements and villages, and the princesses are trying to stop them. The writing in this show isn't strong, but that's basically what's supposed to be happening, so I don't really get why he's so anti-princess and yet doesn't seem to have anything to say about the Horde. His village was destroyed in a war that was caused by the Horde, and if he hadn't joined the rebellion, he would have died with his village. But that doesn't seem to cross his mind at all, and his logic just doesn't hold up when you think about it. Honestly, I think it would have been more interesting if he had just flat out been a Horde sympathizer. That would have been quite the twist. Lance tries to lighten the mood by offering to show them Bo's baby pictures, and Adora actually wants to see them. I'm just gonna assume that she wants to see how other kids grew up outside the Horde, because otherwise that's a little weird. Lance specifically offers bubble bath pictures, so not only are they baby pictures, but they're naked baby pictures. But Bo manages to get the three of them away, and he explains that his parents don't know that he's a rebel fighter. They think that he's off at a boarding school, and he's supposed to be visiting them while he's on break. He says that they decided that he would be the one to inherit the library, so he did the only thing he could do: teach himself archery, tell his parents that he went to a boarding school, but actually run away to join the rebellion. He says he can't handle their disappointment, and this has worked so far, so he asks them to just go along with it. He manages to convince Adora by telling her that the library has the biggest collection of First One's artifacts in Etheria, and that they might be able to get answers about Serenia, so everything should be alright as long as they stick to the plan, and not mention that they're princesses. I'm sure everything will go exactly as they think it will, and it won't fall apart in some spectacular fashion. The thing is, we've seen this storyline a million times before, even within this series, back when Glimmer was trying to hide her glitching from her mother, so we can guess where this is going to go and what the outcome will be. But aside from that, wouldn't his parents have to fill out paperwork and pay tuition? Wouldn't they want to see the school? And why would they send their son off to a school they've never heard of? It's like they were born yesterday. It cuts back to the Fright Zone, and Catra is looking through some paperwork when Scorpia comes in. She tells Catra that she doesn't know what she's supposed to be looking for because she was told to look for anything suspicious, but this is the Fright Zone, so everything is suspicious. Catra tries to get rid of her again, but this time Scorpia isn't having it. She calls her Wildcat again. Seriously, she's her superior officer. Did the writers do any research on military culture? You don't nickname the superior officer. But then things get so much worse. Scorpia takes the blanket and forcibly swaddles Catra in it. Catra starts screaming and protesting, but Scorpia just cradles and coos at her because they couldn't get more creepy. Worst military ever. Catra finally admits that she lost Shadow Weaver and says that she has to find her before Hordak finds out. Scorpia actually takes this seriously, which is appreciated, and she says that they can tell Entrapta so the three of them can look for Shadow Weaver together. But Catra insists that that's a bad idea because Entrapta spends all her time with Hordak and would most likely tell tell him since she's so bad with secrets. So Scorpia reassures her that the two of them will find Shadow Weaver and no one else will know, except for Imp, who's been spying on them the entire time. But that's enough of that, we have to cut back to the 90s sitcom plotline. They're being given a tour of the library. They come across where Bo used to play pretend. I guess they still have that set up, even though it must have been years ago. Glimmer guesses that he was playing pirates, but Lance says that he was actually playing historian, preparing to take over the library even at such a young age. Adora changes the subject, asking if they know anything about She-Ra. They say they do, and that they believe a more accurate translation of her name is Hurrah, and that she would fight for the power of Grayskull. Adora's kind of offended by this, which is kind of funny because that's basically how we feel with this entire show. But Lance also mentions that She-Ra rode on a dragon, and she gets jealous saying that she wants a dragon. Well, there's that little lizard you transformed. But Bo tries to stop her before she reveals too much. But then they ask about their studies, and Bo and Adora fumble through it. But George tells Glimmer he's glad to have met them, and he admits that he thought Bo was lying about having friends, because he's such a shy boy, and he thanks her for bringing him out of his shell. Castaspella also said that she thought Glimmer was making Bo up. Maybe they were trying to draw a parallel between the two characters, but if that was the case, I do think that they could have done a better job of connecting the two because it kind of comes off as being recycled. Bo changes the subject by asking them about Serenia, claiming that it's part of a project they're working on for school. The two of them pull out a lot of texts that they have on the subject, claiming that Serenia was the name of a mythological First One's hero.
Well, that's not right.
Like we said last episode, Serenia was the name of a location on Etheria. I wonder why they chose to use that name for this new concept. Adora remarks that one of the texts is mislabeled and is actually about aqueducts instead of Serenia. George and Lance are shocked that she can read First One's language. Adora tries to brush it off, claiming that she's also a linguistics major, but George asks her to translate the tattoo he has on his arm instead of asking more questions about why they're acting so suspicious. Adora translated it as lunch, which causes George to be embarrassed because he thought it said love, and Lance laughs about it, saying that he likes Adora. Anyway, the two of them ask if she can settle another debate they have, and drag her away from the table. Adora protests, saying that she would rather work on their project, but Lance gives her these puppy dog eyes, and that convinces her to go along with it. They drag her away with Lance singing Best Research Squad, so that explains where Bo gets it from. So Bo and Glimmer research Serenia, and it seems like they're there for a while based on the lighting change, but it might just be there for dramatic effect. Bo says that they're not getting anywhere as he's trying to put the pieces together, but Glimmer gets upset and starts crying because she thinks that everything she knew about Bo was a lie, and that he really is a historian. But Bo says that it's his family who doesn't know the real him, and that he hides it from them because he knows that it'll hurt them. Glimmer says that if his family loves him, then they'll love the real him too, but he's not convinced because he says that his family's had this plan for him all his life. He says he's tried to tell them before, but they don't listen, so he just keeps pretending. I wish that we could have seen more of his actual backstory, like if he grew up in an environment that hated princesses, what was it that made him become best friends with a princess? Was it that he was just rebelling from his family? Did he at one time agree with his family? Or did something happen that made him realize that princesses weren't bad? Also, why did they decide to have their youngest inherit the library? Out of 13 kids, you'd think one of them might actually want to inherit it. Where did his love of adventure come from? These would have been interesting to explore, and we could have gotten some insight into his character, but instead we're told these things without any elaboration. It kind of feels like they want the audience watching to put themselves into Bo's shoes, so they keep these things kind of vague. That way it'll be the most relatable to the audience. I can appreciate that Glimmer's trying to give her friend advice on talking to his family. I mean, he's going to have to talk to them at some point. Bo's parents take Adora to a sphere that they found with the runestone shard, but they don't know what it is, so they ask her to tell them. The sphere has writing on it, which says Eternia, and that acts as a password to activate it, just like the Crystal Castle was back in Season 1. I really don't understand why the first ones would advertise their passwords. They literally had it written on the door of their fortress, and now it's right there. You'd think such an advanced society would know better. That's not very secure. sure. Plus, why is Eternia the password to everything? It would also be nice to get some context for what Eternia is in this series. Serenia is no longer a place. What if Eternia isn't a place anymore either? But moving on, the sphere activates, revealing that it's actually an elemental monster, and it starts rampaging through the library. Adora says that she can fight it off easily and pulls the sword of protection out and transforms into She-Ra in front of everybody. Bo's upset but tries to play it off like she's a 6th major in She-Ra. She-Ra's pretty cocky about the whole thing, only for it to smack her across the room. Glimmer yells at the elemental to leave her alone and starts blasting it with her glitter blasts, and She-Ra jumps back into the fight. This fight is really destructive and is tearing up the library, and even in the midst of all of this, Bo still tries to keep up the boarding school lie to his parents. I'm also a little surprised that Adora jumped directly into She-Ra, considering the fact that she had been trying to keep up the act for Bo's sake. They could have at least had one line of her apologizing and saying that they have to deal with this and there's only one way to do that, but instead she just transforms without a second thought. Maybe she could have run off and then come back as She-Ra and say that even though they don't like princesses, she's still going to help them. They duck behind a table and his parents demand answers. They're pretty sure that Adora and Glimmer are princesses, since it's obvious, but Bo says that right now they have to act before the elemental turns on them. He says they only attack when they're trying to protect something, so they just need to figure out what that is. So his parents question who he even is. But after a close call, Lance brings up that the elemental was found with the runestone shard, so he asks if that could be it. And Bo says he's a genius. He tells them that he'll explain everything, but right now they have to trust him, and he runs off. George calls Bo to come back and explain everything, but that gets the elemental's attention. But Glimmer manages to teleport them to safety. This next part is honestly one of the silliest things we've seen in this show, and that's including the D&D episode. But Bo goes to get his weapon from underneath that display case he threw it under before, but he can't quite reach it. And instead of doing the logical thing of going around the display case to get it from the back, considering the fact that this case is just sitting in the middle of the room and it's not up against a wall, he tears his shirt and reveals his midriff, and then he throws the piece of cloth up into the air while his parents look on in horror. It's all really dramatic. He's then somehow able to fit underneath the case, almost like it was his shirt that was getting in the way, which makes no sense. Why didn't he just go around? And how was his shirt keeping him from getting under there? But he shoots the elemental and then stands there triumphantly, almost like he's defined by his midriff and his weapon. It's kind of creepy, just the way they brought attention to it. But Bo uses his grappling arrow to grab the runestone shard and gives it to the elemental. It accepts it and turns back into a sphere. Glimmer and Adora cheer for him, but his parents are not happy, and they demand to know what's going on. So now Bo has to come clean about all of his lies. There is no academy, his friends are princesses, and he's been fighting in the rebellion. They're very confused by this, and Lance asks why. Bo says he knew the truth would break their hearts, but he says he can't lie about it anymore. Well, he would have kept lying about it if he hadn't gotten caught. But George hugs him and says that what's breaking their hearts is that he thought he had to lie to them. But Bo said that he tried to tell them before and they didn't listen. But all that happened off screen. Maybe we could have seen him try to talk to them in this episode and have them not listen. That way we could have sympathized with him more. But he also says that if he feels he belongs with the rebellion, then that's where he belongs. Lance starts crying and says that they thought they were being supportive, but they were actually being terrible. And George says that they're proud of him no matter what path he takes in life. Then they start crying and hugging, and they tell Adora and Glimmer that princesses are a part of the family too, so they should be in on the hug too. Well, that was fast. I understand this is a cartoon, but this feels really rushed. George had years of resentment against princesses because of what happened to his village, and we never got to hear what their opinion of the Horde was. And now he's willing to change his entire worldview, even though his son's been lying to him for years. And not only was he lying, he was working directly with the people he blamed for the destruction of his village. This storyline is trying to be relatable to a lot of different people who are at odds with their families for lots of different reasons. Like maybe a young person's family wants them to go to college, but they don't want to go to college. And there isn't anything inherently wrong with having a storyline that's relatable, but this is on a totally different level. Bo has been risking his life fighting in a war on the side that his father particularly hates, all while telling his family he was going along with their wishes. is. I know that the elemental thing is something that they haven't experienced before, but was that enough to change the entire family's view on princesses? Or their view on fighting and the war? Earlier in the episode, he said that he didn't even really want the runestone shard in the library and he only kept it because of its historical significance. You'd think after this he would just get rid of it altogether because it's been proven dangerous. This episode might have had more of an impact if the Horde had actually attacked the library, looking for First One's technology and to destroy Theria's history through book burning. There was an episode of the original series about book burning, and it could have been a callback to that. And I think that would have had a much bigger impact on George and Beau's entire family, and maybe could have made them see the war in a different light. That way they could have still had the relatable message, but it also would have worked better in universe. But Beau asks his parents to help them figure out what this mysterious message is saying, and George figures out that the degraded message that they thought was writing is actually representing stars and the solar system. The two of them explain that the First Ones use stars to navigate and named constellations after mythological heroes, including Serenia. So this message is probably referring to the constellation instead of the mythical hero. They go on to say that this particular constellation only appears over the Crimson Waste in summer. I'm confused though, wouldn't they not be able to see the stars because Etheria was forced into a pocket dimension thanks to Mara? A pocket dimension that didn't have any stars? So why would a constellation still appear in the sky? I wish they would have explained this more, but apparently there's some way for them to see a constellation in a different dimension from the Crimson Waste. The Crimson Waste is a desert and a no man's land, and apparently no one's made it back alive, so Lance and George are upset when Adora says they have to go there. The Crimson Waste is actually where Scorpia lived in the 1980s She-Ra cartoon, so it would have been interesting if they had tied it to Scorpia here too, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Anyway, telling them not to go there isn't going to do anything, especially since everything in this show pretty much comes down to the Princess Alliance anyway. Despite the fact that Bright Moon is shown to have an army, they don't seem to do anything with it, so it's probably just gonna come down to the Princess Alliance going out there. Regardless, being involved in a war has a habit of putting people in dangerous positions. This is why we were saying that they really aren't done talking about this whole situation with Beau. The sad part is, if you look at the show for what it is, George isn't really wrong to feel that way about the princesses. Beau was captured after Princess Prom by the Horde because Frosta and Glimmer dropped the ball in what they needed to do to protect the people at the prom. And I'm sure that Beau's parents would just double down on their beliefs if they found out this information. Plus, the kids didn't answer when they were asked not to go to the Crimson Waste, which means that Beau is going to continue lying to his parents. And it just undermines the entire message of the episode. But back in the Fright Zone, Hordak summons Catra and tells her that he wants to touch base like she suggested. He asks how his orders are being carried out, and Catra claims that everything's running smoothly. He asks if that means that Shadow Weaver has been sent to Beast Island, and Catra decides to say yes and that they'll never see her again, only for Imp to come in and play back the recording of Catra admitting that she lost Shadow Weaver. Hordak is furious and says that this was a test for her to come clean, but not only did she lose Shadow Weaver, she also lied about it. So he fires up that machine again and sucks the atmosphere away until Catra passes out. This is where the scene ends, so we don't get to see anything else from this. At least this time Hordak has a reason to be upset, but it is disappointing that something was actually happening with the plot and that's when it cut off. A lot of this episode was our main characters fumbling their way through lies, and now something was happening with the plot and they took it away from us. But at the very end of this episode, Adora is sleeping back at Castle Bright Moon, only for it to be revealed that Shadow Weaver is standing over her. I guess it's a good thing she sleeps with a knife. And that's how this episode ends. I feel like this would have been more impactful if it had been at the end of the last episode. It would have solidified her betrayal to Catra, showing that she never cared about Catra, and she only cared about Adora, maybe because Adora has some power within her. And it would have been more impactful with everything we had seen up until that point, with her becoming Shadow Weaver, betraying Catra, and ultimately going to Adora. Instead, we left all the fantasy stuff behind to go hang out in a 90s sitcom for a while. This episode was such a disappointment, especially those last two scenes. Why couldn't the entire episode have been about that? It seems like this show wants to be more slice of life than fantasy, considering what they choose to focus on. This show is supposed to be a fantasy epic about war and fighting for freedom in the face of tyranny, but instead the war is treated like a joke when they do focus on on it like in episode 2 of this season, while most of the runtime is chewed up by jokes and drama. I find it ironic that a lot of people hated on the original show for being campy and silly, while praising this one for apparently being mature, but the original dealt with very serious topics like tyranny and book burning, while this show has a bad habit of mishandling its messages, just like we see in this episode. Plus that scene with Bo tearing his shirt was just ridiculous. They tried to focus on these relatable messages, which would have been fine if they had made it work better in universe. It just comes off as forced and unrealistic, and that ended up taking us out of the show. The series has also been praised for its representation, both female and LGBT+, especially this episode because of Bo's two dads. But this praise really surprises us. The pair are so steeped in stereotypes that you would expect to see 20 years ago. I guess if people are happy about this, then good for them. But everything is so pastel and pink. Lance is very forgetful and sparkly, and he also wears socks with sandals, while George is the more grounded parent. And they arguably fall into gender roles. And as for Netossa and Spinnerella, we gave them way more attention than this show ever did, to the point where I'm honestly not sure if the person who wrote this article actually watched the show. And the fact that George and Lance got more lines and more attention than Netossa and Spinnerella did is kind of ridiculous because they were billed as basically being main characters along with Mermista and Perfuma, but instead they got absolutely no attention and might as well have not been included in the show. If they had been removed from the series, nothing really would have changed. And it's disappointing because they actually do have potential as characters, but they're basically just showboated around as representation to get good press for the show. And it felt the same with George and Lance. On a side note, George seems to have a lot of influences from the original 80s Bo. Marcus Scribner, the voice actor for this version of Bo, kept saying that the original Bo was a middle-aged man, so I kind of wonder if he was actually imagining Bo in this age range. But that's just our opinion. What do you guys think? We're officially done with this season, but we do still have a few more videos we'd like to make, so you can keep an eye out for those. And season 3 is right around the corner in August, so there's plenty to talk about. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, you can leave a like and subscribe to this channel to see more content like this. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone. Bye guys.